Well, you know, losing your own sleep is one thing, but today's Parenting SOS is all about coping with babies or young kids who might not be used to dealing with the time change. And new parents, you're especially going to want to listen to this one. We have a sleep trainer here, baby sleep trainer, Natalie Willis, joining us in studio today. Welcome, Natalie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you were telling me when we talked that, you know, a lot of times we tell people you have to do it on the front end, going in, you know, start going to bed earlier. But
right.
You're saying there's some things you can actually do in the days after daylight saving.
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to manipulate baby sleep as it is, and so trying to do things ahead of the time change can sometimes backfire and cause more issues. I find with this time change in particular, babies tend to adjust really well. Generally speaking, parents feel that babies wake a little too early, so sometimes this helps them kind of wake up a little bit later. So yeah, this is generally an easier one for babies to tolerate than the fall time change.
Interesting. And what are some of the things you can do?
So one thing I would say is if you have the flexibility in your schedule, allow your child to remain on that later schedule. So let's say that they normally wake up at 7, but now the clock says they're waking up at 8. And parents who, especially those who prioritize their children's sleep, tend to get very stressed out when their schedule is off.
Sure.
So allowing your child to have those later naps is really important. And if it's important to get them back on track, let's say you have to get them up for a certain reason, giving them about 3 to 5 days and then just slowly moving them back. So waking them up at 7 o'clock in the morning if they're trying to sleep in, slowly moving things, it can be really, really helpful.
I tell you, what used to really kill the whole schedule was that ride in the car.
Yes, it's
true. You have to get the older kids somewhere, and then the baby gets, you know, a 2-hour nap in the afternoon, and then how do you recover from that?
Yeah, so sometimes, again, this is where if we have a little bit of time ahead to plan, we can try to adjust. But really, and there's so much range depending on how old your child is. But the one thing I will say is that whatever they're doing, whatever stress they seem to be dealing with because of this change, and even if you want your child to remain on the later schedule, it almost always goes back to where it was within about 1 to 2 weeks. Babies are really good at adjusting. But as the doctor was saying, one of the things that you can do is really make sure that their room is very, very dark, and they're using a sound machine, a fan, something like that, because that will block out the environmental things that might wake them up, or it will help them adjust their sleep more quickly.
So we talked about babies a little bit. Does all of this apply if you have maybe a toddler or maybe a 4 or 5-year-old?
In some ways, it's actually even easier. Again,
with the older kids?
Yes, my children are in elementary school, and they adjusted really quickly. I made sure to put them down a little bit, you know, earlier, maybe last night than I would have. There's a bit of a range generally where kids go down.
And how much earlier though? Like 15 minutes?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, well, it's rare that you'll be able to get a child to go to sleep maybe 15 to 30 minutes earlier than they're used to.
Right.
So just being cognizant of that. Sometimes on the weekends we're like, oh, well, let's, you know, go out to dinner, let's keep, and so making sure that you're keeping that in mind so that you're really watching the clock and knowing that this week is an important week to really focus on what the clock says and make sure you're putting them down appropriately.
Okay, and your website has lots of great information.
Yes,
Give us
it
that.
does. It's babysleeptrainer.com. You can find me on Facebook too. I'm really active there.
Natalie Willis, thank you very much.
You're so
Great
welcome.
tips.